Last week, Absolute Batman Annual #1 came out and made huge waves because the first story in it by writer and artist Daniel Warren Johnson of Extremity, Transformers, Murder Falcon, take your pick. He's probably the most popular artist in comics right now. That story went pretty viral for screenshots of a double-page spread of Batman snapping the arms of a person who's clearly supposed to be a white supremacist. And it's got exactly the right corner of the internet very upset. And they're upset about it, but their responses also indicate that they have not read it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that story, a little bit about Daniel Warren Johnson, and he's a great dude. But I'm also going to talk about why you maybe clearly haven't read that story and some of the context there as well. But I'm also going to go through the stupidest reactions to it. Don't worry. We're going to have fun today. Stick around. I'm Dan Umpton, and this is the Doomcast. First of all, do me a favor, hit subscribe and the bell. I make about one of these videos a week. They're all great, so please don't miss even one. I only talk about things that I like. I don't talk about stuff that I hate. I love the art of Daniel Warren Johnson. And I love Batman. I also love Absolute Batman. Fantastic book. The Annual is also phenomenal. It is incredibly satisfying to see Batman beat the brakes off of corrupt cops and white supremacists, a thing that he's been doing since 1938. A thing that a lot of people who are very upset about this don't seem to understand is that this is not new. Batman is set in a neo-noir setting in which corrupt police are a regular thing. That doesn't mean that Batman or DC inherently condones the beating the shit out of law enforcement. It opposes corrupt cops. In the story, the context of the story, corrupt cops get the brakes beat off them. Also, white supremacists get the brakes beat off them. Not just by Batman, but by Superman, by the entire Justice Society back in the 1940s, who for whatever reason couldn't go and resolve World War II because of the Spear of Destiny or whatever. Anyway, that aside, totally different episode. The reason why I'm going to jump in here and say that you've probably only seen that image from that comic and why you should read the entire story is there's something about Daniel Warren Johnson that you should know. He's, like I just said, he's a great dude. Not only is he a great artist, has impeccable taste in metal, absolutely loves wrestling, and, clearly has Batman dropping the Kenny Omega one-winged angel on a corrupt cop. But Daniel Warren Johnson also inserts very subtle, non-violent messaging in a lot of his comics. Messaging that's very clearly about compassion, about peace, and about loving your enemies. And it's something that's very present right here in that book. I don't know anything about Daniel Warren Johnson's actual politics or his religion. I'm just inferring what I can from stuff that I've read. But the first comic that I read of his was Extremity, which has a not hardly subtle message of nonviolence and forgiveness to people who have wronged you horribly. Character that loses their arm and most of their family to violence and has to go and try and convince what remains of their family to not murder everybody else in this world that they live in. That's the short synopsis, but it's great. And also, a lot of stuff gets punched. It's a story about nonviolence that's incredibly, wildly violent. There's a good reason I'm covering the nonviolent message, because there's a lot of people who didn't read this book that are claiming that it's encouraging violence against people. It's doing exactly the opposite. Anyway, still incredibly satisfying to see Batman beat the piss out of white supremacists. What happens is the Bruce Wayne in Absolute Batman is going to Slaughter Swamp to get non-lethal weaponry, encounters some white supremacists, even though it's not explicitly said in the material of the comic. They're clearly white supremacists because you can see the tattoo. It's very clear imagery. Anyway, beating the crap out of people who are clearly Hispanic immigrants, or at least heavily implied to be, just as these bad guys are heavily implied to be white supremacists. In any case, they beat up Batman, and they beat up a Catholic priest, at least I assume he is, who tries to stop the violence. He then stitches Bruce Wayne up, who then decides to go out as Batman and beat the brakes off of these white supremacists as they're about to destroy an encampment of migrant workers. It's heavily implied that they're just going to murder all of these people. The police that had showed up are on the side of the white supremacists. It's not all of the police of Slaughter Swamp, but you can infer that these are corrupt people. They're not regular police, right? Regardless of what your feelings on police are. After some pretty awesome beatdown action, which includes a giant dump truck, this priest comes in and still says to Batman directly, it's like, this isn't the way to do this. Batman says, this is my way, which is pretty cool. It's still pretty cool. But at the end of it, you see this priest who got the crap beaten out of him by these white supremacists, going and trying to tend to the wounds of all of the injured, both the migrants and the white supremacists alike, which keeps in line with, even in Transformers, Beachcomber is a character that's sworn off violence. He's an Autobot, but he's not going to take to the fight. Anyway, regardless of how you feel about that, it is at least a message that I think a lot of us can agree would be great if it worked. Nonviolence and loving your enemies to try and prevent the spread of further violence. The thing is, the people who are very mad about it didn't read that part. So, let's talk about the absolute worst reactions to this. One of these, I saw a screenshot from 4chan where it says the only comic that's making them money, force Nazis in a politically charged climate. Brilliant, DC. Again, if you actually read the book, it's not Nazis. It's actually a pretty complex story, and the art is impeccable. 10 out of 10. Nobody can fault it at all. Comics_Jeff. Holy shit, I just read DWJ's Absolute Batman story. Guy that responds is a dude named John De La Rose, who is JDA Comics on YouTube anyway. I just want to go ahead and preface this by saying that John De La Rose, like his last name might imply, is probably of Hispanic descent. Not even just Hispanic descent. De La Rose, I think, means of the rice, which that even implies like poverty Spanish, like immigrant. Like my people, Irish, were when they came to the United States. So you would think that he would be a little more sympathetic to this subject matter specifically. No, this is the guy that got very, very upset at Ultimate Comics. Loved Ultimate Comics, specifically Ultimate Spider-Man, up until Black Cat looked like a black girl. He was very mad about that. John De La Rosa's response: this comic book is about hating average Americans. Not true. Go read it. Encouraging political violence like the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Where are you getting that? I'm going to unpack that in a second. Batman murders police. Doesn't kill anybody. Doesn't kill the police. Doesn't look like it. He probably does kill some people because he's running them over with a dump truck, but he one-winged Angel, a cop. Kenny Omega one-wings people all the time, and they don't die. Last, DC Comics wants you dead. He said that about Mark Waid. Mark Waid doesn't want anybody dead either. He's a dickhead. So first of all, John De La Rose should probably shut his mouth about violence, because in 2022 his wife filed for divorce and a protective order over allegations of domestic violence. Both were granted. So, I can understand why you're defending cops then, because, you have something in common with them. But anyway, your spouses have black eyes. But I don't think that's a thing that a Christian does. What a real Christian does is create comic stories like what Daniel Warren Johnson does, like about nonviolence, and about a priest acting like an actual Christian instead of you. For you to think that this is encouraging violence against people like Charlie Kirk, you have to admit that Charlie Kirk was a white supremacist and a Nazi. That's the only way you could read that out of seeing that image. That's all. Anyway, it's not encouraging violence against people like that. This is my favorite one. From Twitter, the Archcast. These two pictures have the exact same political meaning. That's something. One picture is Batman breaking the arm of a white supremacist. The other is Batman committing clearly a hate crime and saying a racial slur. To paraphrase John Mulaney, if Batman's beating the shit out of somebody and saying a word that you can't say, that's the worst image. That's the worst image. Also, white power is calling for genocide. Black Lives Matter is just calling to not get shot by police. I don't know how you could conflate those things unless you have a specific agenda like genocide. Also, look at your profile picture. Last one. A guy named Mike S. Miller Art, who I don't know who this is, but from Twitter, it's nice that you admit this is a direct attack on Elon Musk. A bunch of leftists are pretending it's not. First of all, same thing with Charlie Kirk. You have to acknowledge that Elon Musk is either a Nazi or among them, and there's no billionaires portrayed there. There's no bad faith antagonist debaters in college portrayed here. There's people who are just, covering bats in barbed wire and beating the crap out of migrants. You are full of shit. They're telling on themselves, and that's the best part of it. But the best part of Daniel Warren Johnson's art is, again, that part that isn't getting the coverage that it deserves. And that's the idea that even when it's hard, look, I'm more power to you if you're actually going to dress the wounds of a white supremacist after they get the brakes beat off them by a superhero. I think we can all agree that it would be a better world if that was the way that most people could treat things. Here's the difference in all of this, that a lot of these people who are super upset about all of this is Batman's fictional. White supremacists aren't. That shit happens. There's nobody with a dump truck. There's nobody with an axe on their chest cutting into folks or running over corrupt cops or running over white supremacists. There's nobody there to stop them. It's just people getting put into vans and disappeared, deported for doing what? Working here? Putting money into the local economy? People like maybe John De La Rosa's ancestors. I guess the point is, if you're going to talk about encouraging violence, maybe you should take the plank out of your own eye before you try and remove the speck of dust out of your brother's. Also, my other favorite is Galatians 6:7. Galatians 6:7. Don't be fooled. God can't be mocked. A man reaps what he sows. Everybody would do well to remember that, I think. Especially Daniel Warren Johnson, who's only going to reap the best, I think. Because he genuinely is a good guy. Whatever. He was cool enough to interview me about Extremity way back when he wasn't shit. And now he's like the king of it. And every single time that I see him in line, anytime that I go to Chicago or anywhere, he's like, oh, hey, good to see you again. He's just a genuinely good dude. Anyway, I think maybe that's the lesson in all of this. Try and be a good dude. Thanks for watching. This has been the Doomcast. We'll see you next week. Peace. Don't punch your wife.